We're going to talk about callbacks this morning. Callbacks are sort of of universal interest to us, whether you're installers or service techs, or whether you mostly do maintenances or parts, or regardless, we always have to think about callbacks. So we're going to kind of take it in order of the areas that really do prevent callbacks. Because again, what defines a callback? What makes a callback a callback? This isn't a trick question. What makes something a callback?
They're back out in 30 days.
If the customer calls us back, yeah. I mean, within 30 days, within a reasonable time frame of the last service call, if somebody calls us back, it's a callback. In the past, there's been arguments about what makes, well, that wasn't a callback, that wasn't a real callback. Well, if the customer calls back, it's a callback. So our goal is to prevent the customer from calling back and saying, oh, I think it's still doing the same thing, or something else is going on here. And the biggest way that we can prevent those, because a good percentage of them that are calling us back because they just have an unrealistic expectation about what's going to happen, or they misunderstood what to expect, or whatever the case may be. And so customer communication is a really important part of that. When the client feels like they were heard and listened to, that greatly reduces callbacks, because people call back many times just because they feel like their concerns were dismissed. So let's quickly, what are some things that customers may talk to you about when you're there to do a maintenance or a service call that may not be directly related to the maintenance or service call? What are some of the most common? A room is warm. Yep, that's a big one. What else? Humidity, it feels muggy in the house, maybe. Doesn't feel comfortable. What else? The system seems to be running all the time. Yep, that's a common one. Or maybe there's, I feel like there's more dust in the house than there used to be, or whatever, right? Or since the last guy's been here and changed the thermostat, something's been different, right? It hasn't felt comfortable. It hasn't been, it's been running longer than it used to. So what do we do to make that customer, to close that out with the customer, that concern? What do we do to make sure that the customer feels better about that interaction, or feels like it's been closed out? You discuss it, you listen mostly, but then you take some action related to it. Now, I'm not saying that you make things up, but there are different types of concerns. There are concerns, for example, the client saying it's running a lot, right? So what would we say to the client if they say it's running a lot? Or what would we do that would help to resolve that concern? No, we could look at the thermostat for sure, yeah. What's that? Test the equipment. What else?
Figure out what they're trying to set it down to.
Figure out where they're setting it. That would be one. So what I would suggest is, and this depends on the severity of the complaint. If the client's saying, and you can tell that sometimes it's just a passing comment, and sometimes that it's something that's more in-depth, but either way, you want to engage with that. So what are some things we can always do to help demonstrate to the client that we are listening to them? I want us to actually come up with some tools in the toolbox, some things that we can literally do that will... You can talk back, you can repeat back what they said. Okay, if I'm hearing you right, you're concerned because it seems like it's running a lot more this summer than it has in the past. Well, no, it's always been this way. Okay, so you've always noticed with this system that it's been running a lot in the summer. Yes, I have. Okay. What you don't want to do is start talking right then about why, because you don't know why yet, and the client knows that you don't know why yet. And so when you are somebody who begins to, well, actually in the summer, on the hottest summer day, blah, 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 I'm so smart, listen to me. Clients don't value that. What they want to see is, okay, I hear you, full stop. I'm going to do some measurements, I'm going to take some tests, I'm going to look at some things, and then we can talk about it further. So, but what are some things you can do after that point that will literally reduce callbacks? Let me give you a hint. When the client runs out to you after you've already closed the service call and you're sitting in your van, they run out and they tap on the window. Anybody ever had that happen before? Client runs out, what do they most often say? What's the most common thing that they'll say when they tap on that window?
It hasn't cooled down yet.
Hasn't cooled down yet. That's one. What's another one? I'm still not feeling the air. The air coming out just doesn't feel cold. Have you ever had that one? I don't know, maybe it was just me, but I got that one a lot, especially in retirement communities. And they ought not be getting out the bar stool and standing on top of it at their age. It is just not a good idea. This is not a judgment. It's just wisdom. So clients like that tactile feeling. They want to know that they don't care about all the magical stuff that you do in the magic box nearly as much as they want to know it's blowing cold and it's going to stay comfortable in my house. It's good to know all the fancy talk and all that stuff, but if I start talking about ACA manual J design at 93 degrees in order to maintain 75 and it's actually doing what it's supposed to do with an 18-degree delta from inside to outside, clients are like, blah, 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 you're just trying to get me to be quiet and you're not actually listening to me. But what could you do? Could show them a delta T. You know what you guys, most of you have the job length probes, right? Or some version of that. I'm going to give you a magical callback reducing procedure. Take one of your job length probes and put them in a supply vent. Take one of your job length probes and put them in the return where they can see it. Pull it up on Measure Quick or on the job link app and show them that delta T. Is that a super useful measurement for you to take? Maybe not the world's most useful. Is it very helpful in terms of getting the client to see that it is operating properly? And if you do it in Measure Quick, here's what's cool. You got the little arrow and the green. That's also handy. So those sorts of tools with the client are really valuable. And I'm not saying don't do the rest of the nitty-gritty stuff. You have some clients who want to follow you. You should embrace that, the ones who want to follow you and watch. You just and you don't need to over-talk, but you just confidently kind of talk through what you're doing, what you're looking at, what you're seeing. Those clients will love you forever. The ones where you actually are communicative. Not overly communicative, not making up BS, but just talking through what you're looking at. Okay, I'm going to take a look at the evaporator coil now. I want to look at the blower wheel. These can get dirty sometimes, so I want to inspect that. Let's take a look at the filter. We always got to check that. It's basic, but we got to check it. Let's look at the condenser coil. Let's look at the capacitor. I'm just checking the wires here. All that stuff is super basic, and you can talk through that very easily, and clients value that, especially the ones that are likely to call back because of customer service. So listen to their complaints, explain or show service procedures, and close the job out thoroughly. Closing the job out thoroughly means that you're being thorough with your notes, like Sam just said. But, again, a lot of this stuff doesn't have to be proceduralized. Now, we want to proceduralize it, but in the meantime, just practice it based on the client. Obviously, if you're in a property management call, a lot of this stuff isn't as valuable. But pictures still work. If you really want property management clients to not call back, take pictures of things and send it to them with descriptions. Text it to them, email it to them directly. That's fine. Those are things, use the tools in your toolbox for communication in order to get the client to understand what you're saying and for them to know that you're not being dismissive. That's what they want to hear. We live in a service economy right now where everybody's busy, everybody's understaffed, and everybody feels like they're being dismissed. Like they're just moving on, right? Nobody wants to really address the root problems. And if the client can truly believe that you are there to address whatever root problems they have, they're going to have confidence in you. And then the closeout conversation, saying, hey, is there anything else I can do while I'm here? I'm not trying to rush away. I want to make sure that you're completely satisfied. Is there anything else I can do for you while I'm here or look at or discuss with you? And have that tone, that sort of like, I'm not in a hurry. So that way, we're good. Okay, great. Sign here. Excellent. Have a wonderful day. Move away slowly. Don't rush away. Give them a chance to get their questions answered, because otherwise they're going to call back, and you don't want that. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants them calling back. Sometimes you may feel like you want them to call back. You'd rather have them call back than talk to you anymore. I understand that emotion. I feel that. A lot. Eli loves talking to people, so for him, it's easy. But for me, it's difficult. So anyway, just give plenty of space for that. Now, another tool that I'm going to give you, and this isn't in the slides, but another tool I'm going to give you that's really helpful in our market, because most ducts are in the attic, is when the client has a majority of these types of complaints. The humidity seems high, there's dust in my house, the one room's warmer than another. Go up in the attic. Go up in the attic and look for some obvious stuff. Kinked ducts, improperly strapped, poorly routed, leaving big curvy snakes in the attic. Look for ducts that have come apart. Look for ducts that they're not sealed at the connections, those sorts of things. Because when that exists, if you go up in an attic and ducts aren't properly strapped, ducts aren't properly sealed around the collars and all that, a lot of times we don't want to mention it. Do you know why we don't want to mention it? Because we don't want to have to do it, right? And so my suggestion would be, and this is sort of standard fare, if it's a major problem that has to be addressed, well then yeah, we got to do it. I mean, if the ducts has literally come off. But if it's just a lot of little things in the system, then that's something that we quote and we can do once it cools off. Like, hey, we're not going to spend a lot of time in the attic right now in this season, but we're going to quote it and we'll do that once it cools off. Well, I think it needs to be done now. Well, this isn't like the thing, but it's something to address. I'm really good with that. I'm really good with us pushing as much attic work off as we can. Again, if it's super urgent, then we don't really have a choice, but in general, that's a good idea to do that. But avoiding the conversation doesn't solve anything. And really, that sort of thing is great, because if that is something that you find, and it's minor, you go through the equipment, obviously, and make sure there's nothing else going on. We can quote a nice little job that'll be profitable for us. And now the client knows that, okay, well, I'm just going to have to wait until this is done. It's going to prevent them from calling back. That make sense? Because now we've quoted something that isn't completed yet. It helps kind of close the loop on that. Now, again, I don't want you doing that if you haven't also checked the equipment. We don't want to go back and be like, yeah, the thing's 2 pounds short on refrigerant, and they blamed it on the ductwork. That's worse. But we can, because there's a lot of things that are associated with ductwork and installation. I think we can all agree on that, right? There's a lot of problems in homes that are associated with that. Setting up the system properly in the first place is really big. We're not going to get through all these slides, so don't worry, because this could be a really long class. But setting the system up properly in the first place is a really big deal. This is super frustrating when we've had the installers there, and we've had a couple technicians go back, and then there's just something obvious and dopey that's causing the equipment not to run correctly. So what's a really common one that could result in the system having low performance, the system not cooling well, that could be due to improper installation? Only running one stage. Boom, that's the exact one I was looking for. Right? If it's not staging up to second stage, it ain't going to cool right. The opposite is also true. If it's not set up for proper dehumidification mode, or if it's set up where it's always going to run in second stage, that can occur in some cases. So you need to make sure that the equipment is set up properly. As installers, setting up dip switches, making sure that you set up the controller, if it's like an infinity system, that sort of thing, making sure you're setting it up thoroughly. Taking some time to do that. Now, I understand why that gets missed. Why do you think cleaning drains and setting up the equipment properly and testing it properly at the end get missed more than most other things?
It's been a long, hard day.
It's been a long, hard day, and you are so close to the finish line. You're so close, and as soon as you get that paperwork signed, you get to go home, right? Understandable. I get it. But you do need to give yourself, and this is why it's actually really nice to be super efficient on the front end. It's not so you can get the install done at 2 and go home. It's so that, although that sounds nice, it's so that you can get done quickly, so now you have more time to slow down at the end. Make sure you're confirming all your settings. Make sure you're testing everything. Make sure you're being really thorough. You're checking your static pressure. You're making sure that all the pins are set up properly if it's a standard variable speed system. You're making sure the charge is set properly. Having that final closing conversation with the customer. Cleaning up really well. Showing them how to use the thermostat. All that stuff for installers. Cleaning the drain really well. Making sure it's clean. Those are the things that prevent callbacks. And prevent a lot of frustration for you and everybody else. It's just a big part of closing out that job. When you're commissioning a system, focus on airflow, or you're testing a system, focus on airflow first. It doesn't mean that airflow is more important than charging. They're both important. But a lot of times as techs and installers, we focus on the charging piece because that's the easier one to change, right? Remove a little charge, add a little charge. We already got our gauges hooked up. That's easy. Airflow is like, airflow is not as nice. And where do we start with airflow? We start all with visual inspections. Everybody talks about, and in this world that I deal with, of influencers, everybody talks so smarmily about, whoa, did you measure airflow? And it's always like, well, how do you actually do that? Like, if you have the TrueFlow grid, great. And actually, I do want to get the installers all with the TrueFlow grid and making that part of the process, because it's actually very easy, and we'll make that much more simple. But yeah, if you have a TrueFlow grid, that works. Other than that, there isn't a way to measure airflow. You measure static pressure, so you should be doing that, and we should be doing a bunch of visual inspections. That's what we do and for airflow. Making sure that those pins are set up right, making sure, are the ducts the right size? A lot of this is not, you don't have to be super technical to know that, that duct looks really small. You know, that's a 14-inch flex supply on a 3-ton system, or a flat top flex supply, or a return going into the system that rather than boxing it out, they just took a piece of flex and jammed it into a flat back return and then ran it up into the base of the unit. This stuff is not rocket science, right? I mean, it's thermodynamic science. Hey. It's a lot of visual inspection, and it's testing static pressure. For those of you who are not comfortable with checking static pressure, the only reason you're not comfortable is because you haven't done it enough. That's all. And the only thing that you need to do in order to get more comfortable is just do it more. This whole thing of like, well, I haven't been shown how to do it. You know how risky it is to try? Not risky at all. Like, it's not going to explode. It's just do it. Watch, there's videos on it. There's illustrations on it. Pull up the HVAC School app. Go into the procedure of checking airflow using static pressure, because you can do it. It's just multiple steps. All of that stuff exists. If you want to know how to do it, it is a piece of cake. You just got to do it more. And all of us need to probably do it more, because it's an easy measurement that it's very useful for a lot of things. It's not just total external static on the equipment. It's measuring pressure drops over filters, pressure drops over evaporator coils, pressure drops across ducts in some cases. So there's a lot of things you can do with that. But those are the two tools in your toolbox primarily: being really comfortable measuring static pressure and knowing what that means, and doing a lot of visual inspections, looking at blower wheels, looking at evaporator coils, paying attention to that kind of stuff. If you're putting a new system in, vertical install, and it's got that horizontal drain pan sitting in there, pull that out before you put the coil in. Take that out. That creates turbulence in the air handler. Is it significant? No, not a lot, but it's good to pull it out, right? So just do practical things that result in better system airflow. It is not that complicated. A lot of people get distributed airflow confused with system airflow. The TrueFlow grid is an example of measuring system airflow. Distributed airflow is when you're measuring it actually at the supplies and the returns. Making sure that when we're doing duct upgrades or anything, duct changes, we need to be putting in balancing dampers. I'm non-negotiable about that. I know sometimes it doesn't happen, but if you show up on a job and it's like, hey, we're doing all this duct work, where are the balancing dampers? Get the balancing dampers. Come back and put the balancing dampers in. I don't care. But the reason is because now that gives you control. You can oversize ducts, you can make them a little bigger than they need to be, and then you can control the actual flow coming out of the vent using a balancing damper and testing. I'm not going to keep going any more than that, but I do want to focus. We'll do that in the next meeting. We'll make this a 2-part series and keep going with that. Today's focus will be on visual inspection and client communications. 2 tools in your toolbox I want you to make more use of is checking ductwork, visually going up and checking ductwork, and using your wireless probes to demonstrate to the client that you have the delta T, you have that air temperature split that you expect, because that helps kind of anchor that for the client. I think if you do those 2 things with clients who are especially a little fidgety, I think those 2 things alone, as well as being willing to kind of describe your process, are going to reduce a lot of callback. All right, have a great week. Thank you.
Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed it and got something out of it, if you wouldn't mind hitting the thumbs up button to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notifications bell to be notified when new videos come out. HVAC School is far more than a YouTube channel. You can find out more by going to hvacrschool.com, which is our website and hub for all of our content, including tech tips, videos, podcasts, and so much more. You can also subscribe to the podcast on any podcast app of your choosing. You can also join our Facebook group if you want to weigh in on the conversation yourself. Thanks again for watching.